everybody, what's going on? And welcome to Guns N' Roses Central. And with the tragic news of Chris Cornell passing away, I wanted to do a Guns N' Roses true story episode, but do this episode about Chris Cornell and his history with the members of Guns N' Roses. And I want to look at the Use Your Illusion tour all the way to just before his passing. So in this episode, let's talk about Soundgarden. So in the beginning, of the Use Your Illusion tour, Guns N' Roses had a number of different opening acts. And a band that was opening quite frequently for Guns N' Roses because a lot of other bands didn't want to open for Guns N' Roses was Soundgarden. So before we get to that part, I want to show an interview that Chris Cornell did back in 1990. He was on MTV, and the interviewer told him that Axl is a huge fan of Soundgarden and basically asked Chris what he thinks about Axl Rose being a fan. So here's the interview.
Chris, I read in an interview from Axl Rose that he said that he thinks you're like the best vocalist out there.
Wow.
Did you are you friends with those guys, or?
We met him. We met Axl. He came to a couple of our shows.
I know he's a big fan of yours.
Yeah.
Now, the very first show that Guns N' Roses played with Soundgarden as a supporting act took place on December 5th of 1991. This was in Worcester, Massachusetts, and this was actually Gilby Clarke's very first show as well. Now, this is the only photo I've ever been able to find of this actual gig. There's pro shot footage elsewhere, but it's probably in a vault somewhere with the Guns N' Roses camp. Now, Soundgarden would go on to support Guns N' Roses for the rest of 1991, all the way through the rest of their U.S. tour dates, up to the last show they played in Europe in 1992, which was in Lisbon, Portugal. Now, sometimes Soundgarden would be the only opening act. Other times, they'd be joined by the band Faith No More as well. It was pretty common for a lot of the European shows for there to be Soundgarden and Faith No More opening for Guns N' Roses. Now, if you guys have read Slash's book that he put out back in 2007, he talked about Soundgarden opening for Guns N' Roses, and he said Guns couldn't believe how seriously Soundgarden grunge masters took themselves, and Slash said that Soundgarden came from a place where there was no fun to be had while rocking, so during their final show together, Slash, Matt Sorum, and I think Duff actually got naked, went out on stage while Soundgarden was performing with some blow-up dolls, and we're just goofing around backstage, and Slash, I think, was so drunk that he actually fell, and then he actually had to be taken off stage by the Guns N' Roses handlers. And Slash did an interview in Prague in the Czech Republic back in 1992, and he talked about Guns N' Roses choosing who would open for them, and he talked a bit about Soundgarden, as you can see here. And then we also have an interview with Soundgarden talking about the impact of actually opening for a band like Guns N' Roses.
Bands.
We did.
Do you like their music?
Yeah.
Can you say about them something?
Well, Faith No More is a band that we got turned on to a while back when their first record, not their first record, their third record came out, and we loved it. So that was one. Soundgarden, we got turned on to at some point. I don't remember when, but we just thought they were great. So when it came to support bands, we like to play with people that we like.
And how is
Roses tour? Yeah, perhaps a little bit, because I think a lot of people wanted to do interviews with us to find out about Guns N' Roses. And our audience grew pretty quickly, and the press, the circle of people we had a working relationship with keeps growing. And pieces are moved, new pieces are added. And with the Guns N' Roses tour, the circle was really huge, a lot larger as far as who wanted to deal with you and who wanted a piece of you. And you don't have any time to develop these relationships or even maintain them or anything. So that could be a little bit quick. You got half the people you don't even want in your circle. You don't even want to deal with them. They're there.
And following the Use Your Illusion tour, Soundgarden would eventually go on to do a number of records before they actually broke up. And, there was a number of interviews that Chris Cornell did over the years where he talked about what it was like to tour with Guns N' Roses. This is the photo I found of Slash actually jamming with the guitarist from Soundgarden back in 1991 at the Hollywood Palladium. I thought you guys might enjoy. So let's talk about Chris Cornell's actual quotes. Chris Cornell did an interview back in 2012 where he talked about what it was like to actually open for Guns N' Roses. And it was an interview with Vulture.com, and this is what he had to say about GNR. He said, without saying anything negative about Guns N' Roses frontman Axl Rose, what I remember the most was Duff and Slash and everyone else being regular, sweet, warm guys in a rock band that just wanted to play rock music, he said. And then, there was this Wizard of Oz character behind the curtain that seemed to complicate what was the most ideal situation they could have ever been in. They were the most successful and famous rock band on the planet. Every single show, hundreds of thousands of fans just wanted to hear their songs. For some reason, there seemed to be this obstacle in just going out and participating in that. That is what I remember the most. It's sad. There was also an interview he did back in 2005 where he was asked about touring with Guns N' Roses and about anything he really remembered. He said there was two main things. First, they had this enormous aluminum stage with catwalks, and at the end of each catwalk was a teleprompter so Axl could read the lyrics to his own songs, which I thought was a little weird since they only had 2 albums. He also said that the other thing that he remembered was that you were not allowed to be in the hallway or anywhere where Axl might see you when he was walking between the dressing room and the stage unless you were Chris Cornell. So one day I see a security guard walking him down the long corridor where there's no one except for me, and it's like they want me to see him. He's wearing his Axl Rose tennis shoes that say Axl Rose on them, and these teeny tiny painted on red shorts, a backwards baseball cap, and a fur coat that goes to the floor, and he just walks by and goes, "Hey bro," and that was it. At that point, it's one of those moments where you think your life is a comic book and it isn't really happening. Now, following the Use Your Illusion tour in 1993, Guns N' Roses would release their final studio album featuring Axl, Slash, and Duff. And included on this album was mostly punk cover songs, but also included was a Soundgarden song, Big Dumb Sex, which was mashed together with the T-Rex song, Buick McCain. And Axl and Slash actually talked about the song when they did an interview with Rockline back in 1994. It was actually the last interview they did together. So one of the callers on the show asked Slash and Axl, how did you guys come up with the idea of mashing both the songs together? Who came up with the idea? And Axl said it was his idea. So on the song, both Axl and Slash sing the vocals. And Axl said, because the riff was similar, talking about Buick McCain and the Soundgarden song Big Dumb Sex, if not the same, and I thought it just added something to it. And plus, we really like the Soundgarden guys, and that particular song is, I think, a cult classic, whether it is or not. And Axl said it's a really sexy song and gets kind of aggressive, and so an aggressive, sexy song on top of that. So following Slash's departure from Guns N' Roses in 1996, there was an article published on July 11th, 1997, talking about Slash and how he was too busy to worry about Guns N' Roses. And at that time, he was actually looking for a new singer for Slash's Snake Pit. He was also doing a soundtrack for an animation called Fathead, and he played, of course, on a song by Blackstreet called Fix. He also had this to say about Chris Cornell. He said, if he wanted to sing for a band outside of Soundgarden, I would play with him in a heartbeat. In 1999, Chris Cornell did an interview where he briefly mentioned Josh Freese, who had played with Axl in his version of Guns N' Roses, and of course the new Guns N' Roses record. So Chris Cornell was playing with Josh Freese, and the issue of Guns N' Roses came up in the interview. So basically the interviewer asked Chris Cornell, so did you get any sneak insights into the Guns N' Roses record? He said, no, not really. He's also very word careful. We asked him certain questions, but he knew what he should and shouldn't talk about. I just wanted to know what it felt like for him to be playing Guns N' Roses' Sweet Child of Mine with a band made out of all these punk rock guys and Axl, because I think that's really effing weird, but it must have been kind of cool. Going from Chris Cornell to Axl Rose and back must have been a bit of a trip. 2 very different ways of working, I would imagine. The interviewer asked Chris, to which he responded, yeah, but I think they actually have a lot of creative freedom with what they're doing with Axl. They're getting to write parts and stuff, and when he'd come to work with me, it's almost the opposite of what you would think. I would tell him exactly what to play when the song was finished. And Chris Cornell and Axl Rose would actually share a list together in 2005. They were mentioned in the Hit Parader magazine's issue where they ranked the all-time top 10 most mysterious metal stars. Number 1 was Axl Rose on the list, and number 7 was Chris Cornell. Now, following Scott Weiland's departure from Velvet Revolver in 2008, it was rumored that Velvet Revolver were in talks with some high-profile singers to replace Weiland. At one point, Lenny Kravitz's name was thrown in, even Chris Cornell's name was thrown in, but as we know, those rumors turned out to be false. Now, in 2010, Slash released his solo album titled Slash, and one of the people singing on his album who guest starred was actually Chris Cornell. He sang on a song called Promise, which Slash would play live with Myles Kennedy when they go on tour the same year. Now, Chris Cornell was actually interviewed about the song and had this to say about the song. It's a song that you would write to either a young friend or one of your children, giving them advice of don't let the world get you down because it's going to try. It's the nature of youth to have a rosy outlook and feel like you're going to be able to charge through life with a machete and make your own way. But the reality is that a lot of unexpected things are going to crash on you, and the song deals with that. He also talked a bit about Slash as well. He said, I met Slash in 1992 when GNR took Soundgarden on tour. He was extremely gracious and always very supportive. Often when you're on tour with a band that is successful, they treat you like shit. Slash was a very consistent and amiable person, and he is now. And he's also said that, and I will say this, and I don't mean this as a slight to him, it's actually a compliment. Slash is the most drunk guitarist I've ever seen play well on stage. I was never able to be that thrashed and that good at the same time. That's part of his consistency. He doesn't drink now, and he's still great. That dedication to music is what drives his character. Meanwhile, in a different interview, Slash gave his own view of the song and on working with Chris Cornell, saying Chris was great. Promise was probably the most unorthodox piece of music I'd written. It was very different. It was one of those things that I don't know why I thought of him for that song more than any of the others, but I sent it to him, and within 48 hours he sent me this great lyric, and we were off and running. It was as simple as that. Everybody seems to like this one. And then in 2014, Duff, McKagan, and Chris Cornell joined forces for the Mad Season reunion. Now, even though Mad Season only put out one album in 1995 titled Above, two of their members had actually passed away. So Lane Staley had passed away, and their bass player John Baker Saunders had also passed away in 1999. So the rest of the original lineup, featuring guitarist Mike McCready and Screaming Trees drummer Barrett Martin, actually played along with Chris Cornell and bassist Duff McKagan, who filled in for the two deceased members. So if you guys want to check out the footage of the actual concert, it's up on YouTube. And then finally, the last thing I want to leave you guys with is that Slash, Duff, and Matt Sorum all pay tribute to Chris Cornell with the news of his passing. And that basically does it for this episode of Guns N' Roses True Story, guys. I just want to say that if I have to pick a favorite Soundgarden song, to me it's probably Blow Up the Outside World. When I have a really bad day, I just love to listen to that song, because it's kind of like, you have a really bad day and it's like, wow, I'm not the only one. Everybody goes through this kind of stuff, and I totally relate to this song. So that's probably my favorite Soundgarden song. Let me know your guys' favorite Soundgarden song down in the comments below. Hit the like button if you enjoyed this episode of True Story. And be sure to subscribe if you love Guns N' Roses as much as I do. And follow me on social media. The links to my social media channels are down below as well. Thanks for watching, guys, and have yourself a good weekend.